London is wrapped in fog, and where others see chaos, he finds the truth. The legendary detective Sherlock Holmes is back in the game. Welcome to the channel. Put on your headphones and unravel new mysteries alongside him. It was upon a particularly raw morning in late November of the year 1895 that I found myself once more in the familiar armchair before the fire of our sitting room at 221B Baker Street. A drizzling rain streaked the windows, and the fog from the river coiled upward in ghostly ribbons, pressing its grey fingers against the panes. The city beyond was but a blur of lamps and carriage wheels, muffled by the mist and the steady patter of the rain. I was engaged in no more energetic pursuit than nursing a cup of tea, while Holmes, wrapped in his old dressing gown, stood before the hearth, a sheet of newspaper in one hand and his pipe in the other. "London," said he at last, glancing toward me with that familiar gleam in his eye, "is a living organism, Watson, but one with as many ailments as any patient you ever treated. Every morning's paper is a medical chart of the metropolis. Here," he tapped the column, "you have a case of social fever, there a symptom of corruption, and yonder an outbreak of crime." I smiled. "You speak as if you were its physician." "Perhaps I am," he returned lightly, "though I confess I prefer surgery. A clean incision, a clear result. But alas, London rarely provides so tidy a wound." He folded the paper and tossed it onto the table. "Still, I have the sense, my dear fellow, that this morning may yet yield something of interest. Lestrade was to call, was he not?" "He was," said I, consulting the clock upon the mantel. "But it is past 9, and we have had no word." At that instant, as though in answer to my words, there came the unmistakable sound of a cab drawing up in the street below, followed by a sharp ring at the bell. Mrs. Hudson's voice murmured faintly, and then quick steps ascended the stairs. A moment later, our door opened, and a tall, iron-grey gentleman entered with a sweep of his coat and a face pale from agitation. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I presume," he said, his voice quivering slightly. "I am Sir Alaric Burnham. You must forgive my intrusion at this early hour, but I am in the gravest distress." Holmes motioned him toward the chair opposite the fire. "Pray be seated, Sir Alaric. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson. You may speak freely before him. Now then, you say you are in distress. What has occurred?" Sir Alaric sank into the chair, running a gloved hand across his brow. He was a man of 50, broad-shouldered and of firm bearing, yet at that moment he appeared thoroughly unnerved. "It is theft, Mr. Holmes. A daring, impossible theft. My diamond, the Eye of Solomon, has been stolen from my private safe, and if it cannot be recovered, I am ruined." Holmes's eyes lit with interest. "Indeed? Tell me everything from the beginning." The baronet took a deep breath. "The diamond was of extraordinary value, beyond estimation. It was given to me by an Eastern prince for services rendered in the Sudan campaign. It has been kept these 5 years in a locked safe in my study at Burnham Hall. Yesterday morning, I opened that safe, intending to show the gem to a prospective buyer. The door stood ajar, the lock unbroken, the mechanism untouched, but the diamond was gone." "Curious," murmured Holmes. "A theft without entry. Who else had access to the study?" "No one," said Sir Alaric emphatically. "The room is kept locked, Only my wife, my secretary, and my valet possess keys to the house, but not to the safe. Inspector Lestrade has already examined the place and found no trace of tampering. Lestrade, you say? Holmes nodded. Then the matter is officially in hand. It is, but he admits himself baffled, replied the baronet. He believes the thief must be one of my servants. I cannot believe it, Mr. Holmes. My household has been with me for years. Yet there is one thing more, one terrible detail. His voice dropped to a whisper. When I told the inspector of the diamond's history, he made inquiries at my jeweller's, and they swear no such stone has ever been appraised or registered in my name. Holmes's brows rose a fraction. No record? Not even a mention in insurance documents? None, said Sir Alaric. Yet I held it in my own hands. My wife has seen it, my secretary too. It was as large as a pigeon's egg, with a strange fire at its heart. You cannot imagine that I am mistaken. Holmes steepled his fingers. I never assume imagination where observation will suffice. Still, the matter presents an odd paradox. You say your safe was unopened, the diamond unseen by any official source, and yet it has vanished. Exactly. That is why I have come to you, Mr. Holmes. The police may search for a thief. I beg you to search for the truth. Holmes rose and crossed to the window, where the rain traced pale lines down the glass. For a long moment he stood motionless, then turned sharply. Sir Alaric, I shall come to Burnham Hall this afternoon. Dr. Watson will accompany me. Until then, do nothing further. Touch nothing in your study and speak of this matter to no one. The baronet rose. You give me hope, sir. I am deeply grateful. With that, he took his leave as abruptly as he had entered, leaving the faint scent of damp wool and anxiety behind him. For a time, neither Holmes nor I spoke. The ticking of the clock filled the silence. Well, Holmes, I said at last. He smiled faintly. My dear Watson, we have before us what may be the strangest of all problems, the disappearance of a thing that, by all accounts, never existed. There is no theft more curious than the crime that never happened. He reached for his violin, drawing the bow across the strings in a soft, meditative chord. Come, Watson, let us see what ghosts dwell at Burnham Hall. That same afternoon, beneath a lowering sky, Holmes and I set out by train for Surrey, where Burnham Hall lay amid a stretch of moorland and dark pine. The journey was one of the quietest I can recall. Holmes sat opposite me, chin upon breast, eyes half closed. That singular attitude of intense concentration I had come to associate with the first stirrings of his analytic mind. I knew better than to interrupt. It was not until the train drew near to our destination that he roused himself, tapping his fingers lightly upon the window pane. Watson, said he, you observed our visitor's hands, no doubt. I did. Firm and well kept, the hands of a soldier. Indeed. And yet there was a faint discoloration about the right forefinger, a yellowish stain of sealing wax, recent by the look of it. A curious detail when one considers his tale of a jewel locked in a safe. You suspect he has tampered with the contents himself? I suspect nothing yet. Holmes returned with a slight smile. I merely note the inconsistency. A man seldom handles sealing wax unless he seals something, and in my experience, what is sealed in such haste is not a diamond, but a document. The whistles sounded, and soon we were walking up the gravel drive toward Burnham Hall, a square grey stone house of considerable age. The air smelled of rain and sodden earth. A butler received us. a grave, thin man with a stoop and a manner of subdued tension. "Sir Alaric is expecting you, gentlemen. This way, if you please." We were shown into a spacious library whose shelves reached to the ceiling. There, pacing before the hearth, stood Sir Alaric Burnham. His expression brightened as we entered, though the lines of worry about his eyes had deepened since the morning. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I cannot tell you how relieved I am to see you. This business has unsettled the entire household." Holmes inclined his head. "Let us proceed at once to the scene of the alleged theft." The baronet led us to an adjoining room, his private study. It was a chamber of masculine simplicity, a large writing desk, a few leather chairs, and a heavy safe set into the wall behind a portrait. The curtains were half drawn, the air faintly perfumed with tobacco and something else, burnt paper, if my nose did not deceive me. "There stands the safe," said Sir Alaric, gesturing toward it. "It was in that place I kept the Eye of Solomon. As you see, there is no sign of force." Holmes bent before the safe, examining the dial and hinges through his lens. "Quite so," he murmured. "No scratches upon the metal, no bruising of the paint. Yet this faint smear of dust about the handle tells a tale of its own. The door has been opened recently, and with care. Watson, your penknife, if you please." He scraped delicately at a dark patch near the keyhole and held the fragment to the light. "Ah, a trace of black wax. And there, within the groove, a minute fibre. Cotton thread, I think. Remarkable." Sir Alaric shifted uneasily. "Does it tell you anything?" "It tells me," said Holmes, straightening, "that your safe was not forced, but imitated. Someone has contrived to make it appear undisturbed after opening it by means of a false impression of the key or combination. Tell me, did any servant or family member witness you with the diamond in recent days?" "No," replied the baronet. "I alone have seen it for months. My wife detests the thing. She says it carries an evil charm. I had thought to sell it quietly." Holmes's eyes flickered toward the hearth. "Your wife is in the house?" "She is. Would you care to speak with her?" "In due time. For the moment, I should like to inspect this room more thoroughly." He moved with swift, feline precision, testing the latch of the windows, the carpet, the edge of the writing desk. Presently, he paused by the fireplace. Kneeling, he drew out a pinch of ashes and scattered them upon a sheet of paper. "Burnt paper, as I thought," said he softly. "And not old, either. See the unconsumed corner, Watson, parchment with traces of writing still visible. Observe this ink, violet rather than black. Does that suggest a jeweller's receipt to you?" Sir Alaric coloured slightly. I may have destroyed some correspondence this morning. I scarcely recall." "Doubtless," said Holmes dryly. "And yet one might have expected a man whose treasure was stolen to preserve every scrap of evidence relating to it. Very curious, Sir Alaric, very curious indeed." At that moment there came a light knock upon the door, and a lady entered. She was of delicate appearance, dark-haired, her eyes large and thoughtful beneath a veil of fatigue. "My dear," said the baronet quickly, "this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. They are assisting the police in the matter." Lady Eveline inclined her head gracefully. "I thank you, gentlemen. I fear my husband has been much distressed. This affair has cast a shadow over us all." Holmes bowed. "Madam, I should be grateful for your recollection of the events preceding the discovery. Did you observe anything unusual yesterday morning? Only that my husband appeared anxious, she said softly. He left the breakfast table without finishing his meal and went directly to his study. I heard him cry out not long after, and when I entered, he stood before the open safe, quite pale. He told me the diamond was gone. "You have seen this diamond yourself?" asked Holmes. "Yes," she replied, hesitating only slightly. "It was beautiful, though I never liked it. Its fire seemed unnatural. My husband valued it more than was wise." Holmes's gaze rested upon her for a moment longer than courtesy required. "Thank you, Lady Burnham. You have been most helpful." When she had withdrawn, Holmes turned abruptly to Sir Alaric. "You spoke earlier of your secretary. Is he in the house?" "Yes. Mr. Phelps attends to my correspondence. A loyal and capable man." "Then kindly ask him to join us here." The secretary, when he arrived, was a thin, fair-haired fellow of nervous disposition. He gave his testimony readily. He had seen nothing, heard nothing, and knew nothing of the diamond save what Sir Alaric had told him. Holmes listened impassively, then dismissed him. When the door closed, he said, "Watson, we have now seen the actors in our little drama. Each bears a mask: the anxious husband, the weary wife, the faithful retainer. The truth lies beneath one of those masks." He moved once more to the safe, then to the desk. There he picked up a sheet of fresh notepaper and held it beneath his lens. "Interesting. The impression of a recent letter. Observe, the words are faint but legible. Cannot continue this deception. The matter will end tonight." "Watson, what do you make of that?" "Blackmail," I said involuntarily. "Possibly, or confession. Either way, the phantom jewel grows less substantial by the minute. If it ever existed, it was the shadow of something far less glittering." Sir Alaric, who had been pacing restlessly, turned on us. "Mr. Holmes, I cannot endure this uncertainty. You speak as if I were deluded. Are you suggesting there was no diamond?" Holmes's face was unreadable. "I suggest nothing, yet. But I begin to suspect that what was lost was not a stone, but a secret." The baronet gave a strangled sound and strode from the room. Holmes watched him go with an expression of grave contemplation. "Watson," said he at last, "our friend Burnham fears exposure more than loss. That is the clue. There is a fraud here, a deception artfully contrived. And if I mistake not, it will unravel before midnight. Come, we shall remain at Burnham Hall tonight. The storm outside promises a lively evening." As the wind rose and rattled against the windows, I could not help but feel that we had entered not merely a country house, but a stage upon which unseen forces waited their cue. The wind had increased to a mournful roar by the time the dinner hour approached. The moors outside were lost in darkness, save for the occasional glimmer of lightning across the horizon. Within Burnham Hall, all was tense civility. The servants moved as though upon eggshells, and even Sir Alaric's usually resonant voice fell to a constrained murmur. Holmes, calm as ever, occupied himself with his pipe at the far end of the dining table, making the lightest of conversation, while I did my best to preserve appearances amid the palpable unease. Lady Eveline sat opposite me, her complexion pale in the candlelight. At times she glanced toward her husband, who toyed with his glass, scarcely eating a bite. I caught Holmes's eye once or twice, but his face betrayed nothing of his thoughts. He appeared absorbed in his meal, Yet I could see from the slight rhythmic tapping of his fingers that his mind was working furiously beneath that mask of composure. At length, as the plates were cleared, Holmes spoke in his deliberate tone. "You have a fine house here, Sir Alaric. It must have a history." The baronet looked up, startled by the banality of the remark. "A long one, Mr. Holmes. My ancestors built the hall in the reign of Queen Anne. It has passed from father to son for generations, and will continue to do so, I trust," Holmes returned mildly. "Though it seems to me that the recent misfortune has cast some gloom upon its walls." Sir Alaric frowned. "A temporary matter only. Once the diamond is recovered, all will be well." "Indeed," said Holmes. "And until then, you have taken precautions?" "Every door is locked. The servants are accounted for. My study remains sealed," the baronet replied. Holmes nodded. "Excellent. If you have no objection, Watson and I shall make a brief survey of the grounds before retiring. I prefer to know the lay of the land." Sir Alaric waved a weary hand. "As you please, Mr. Holmes. I trust you will find nothing of consequence." We rose, and a few minutes later found ourselves outside beneath a sky turbulent with wind. Holmes's lantern threw a narrow circle of yellow light as we crossed the gravel paths. Rain began to fall, sharp and cold. "Holmes," said I, pulling my coat close, "what in heaven's name are you looking for out here?" He smiled faintly. "The unexpected, as always, my dear Watson. Observe those footprints along the flower bed. Too large for any of the maids, too recent for the gardener. Someone has been here within the hour, and in this storm, no less. See how the soil is pressed inward rather than outward. The intruder was entering the house, not leaving it." I peered down. The prints were indeed distinct, half a dozen of them leading toward the narrow side door of the study. Holmes bent to examine the lock. "Unmarked," he muttered. "A skeleton key, perhaps, or an accomplice within." He straightened, the rain streaming from his hat brim. "Come, Watson. We shall return to the library by the other entrance. I have a notion I wish to test." When we re-entered the house, the corridors were dim save for the glow of a single lamp. A hush had fallen. Even the clock seemed to tick with caution. We passed through the hall and paused outside the study door. "Do you hear that?" Holmes whispered. There was a faint rustle from within, the sound of paper, or perhaps the turn of a key. Holmes moved noiselessly forward, hand upon the latch. "We shall disturb our ghost," he murmured, and opened the door in one swift motion. The room was empty. The fire had burned low, and the shadows danced along the shelves. Yet the air carried a distinct odor of sealing wax and something acrid, perhaps candle smoke. Holmes advanced to the desk, where a half-burned taper still smoked faintly. "Someone was here no more than 5 minutes ago," he said. "And look, a drawer ajar. Our intruder was searching for something." He drew out a folded sheet from the drawer's recess. It was blank. Then, raising it to the light, he gave a short laugh. "Invisible ink. The faintest trace remains. Someone has been removing evidence of correspondence." At that moment, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Sir Alaric entered, pale with anger. "Mr. Holmes, what is the meaning of this intrusion? I expressly forbade anyone to enter this room." Holmes regarded him coolly. "Then perhaps you will tell us who has entered it within the last quarter hour." The baronet stared. "What do you mean?" "I mean," said Holmes, "that we found the side door unlatched, footprints leading directly here, and a candle still smoking on your desk. Whoever came here did so in secret. Was it you, Sir Alaric?" "Certainly not," cried the other. "I have been in the drawing room with my wife." Holmes's gaze was steady. "Then perhaps Lady Eveline would confirm that." "I will fetch her at once," Sir Alaric said sharply, and turned on his heel. Holmes waited until the sound of his steps had faded, then said quietly, "Watson, we are closing in. The key to this mystery lies in these ashes, this wax, and these vanished letters. The theft was a masquerade. But of what?" In a few minutes, Sir Alaric returned with Lady Eveline upon his arm. She seemed uneasy, her eyes flicking from Holmes to the desk and back again. "Lady Burnham," said Holmes gently, "forgive me, but I must ask, have you entered this room since we spoke earlier?" "No, Mr. Holmes," she replied. Her hands trembled slightly. "I have not been near it." Holmes inclined his head. "Then someone else has done so. The prints outside prove it." Sir Alaric turned a livid hue. "Then the thief has returned. By heaven, I'll have every door barred, every servant searched." "Not yet," Holmes interrupted. "To act too soon would be to frighten away the truth. Let us instead maintain our watch quietly. Dr. Watson and I shall keep guard here tonight. The criminal will come again. Of that I am certain." Lady Eveline gave a faint cry. "Oh, must you? This dreadful room. It chills me." Holmes regarded her with a gentleness rare for him. "Courage, madam. Before dawn, this house will be free of its shadow." Sir Alaric looked from one to the other, bewildered. "Do as you will, Mr. Holmes, but I swear that I shall not rest until the Eye of Solomon is restored." When they had gone, Holmes and I settled ourselves in the study. He extinguished the lamp, leaving only the embers to cast a dull glow. The wind battered at the windows. The hours passed slowly. Midnight came and went. Suddenly, Holmes touched my arm. "Watson, listen." From somewhere near the corridor came a faint metallic click. The handle of the door turned ever so slightly. A shadow slipped inside. Holmes moved like lightning, striking a match and seizing the lantern. The beam fell upon a familiar figure, the secretary, Phelps, his face white as chalk. He gave a gasp and dropped what he held, a small brass key. "Well, Mr. Phelps," said Holmes quietly, "you might as well be seated. The night's masquerade is over." The unfortunate man collapsed into a chair, his hands shaking. "I swear, sir, I meant no harm. I was only retrieving what was mine." "What was yours?" Holmes repeated, his voice like steel. "The papers," cried Phelps. "Not the diamond. There never was a diamond. Only the false story Sir Alaric invented to hide his theft from the company. He forged documents, sealed them in the safe, and claimed they were records of foreign investments. When I discovered the truth, he begged me to remain silent. But I kept the letters, as proof if ever he should betray me." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And tonight you came to recover them?" "Yes, before he destroyed the last of them." Holmes turned to me. "You see, Watson, the theft was the cover, not the crime. The stolen jewel was a fiction to conceal fraud. Yet our tale is not quite complete. Tell me, Mr. Phelps, who else knew of this deception?" The secretary hesitated, his eyes darting toward the door. "Lady Eveline," he whispered. "She discovered it yesterday morning. She threatened to expose him. That is why he pretended the diamond was stolen, to distract suspicion from his books." Holmes's face softened with understanding. "Then the mystery grows clearer, though not simpler. The crime that never happened, Watson, yet one that may ruin a man's name before dawn. The thunder rolled outside, and in that moment I felt the strange certainty that we had stumbled upon a truth more perilous than any jewel theft could ever have been. The confession of the trembling secretary hung in the air like the final note of a dissonant chord. For several moments, Holmes regarded him in silence, the faint light of the dying fire flickering across his sharp features. The storm outside raged with unrelenting fury, and each gust seemed to echo the turmoil within the house. At last, Holmes spoke, his tone calm yet incisive. "Mr. Phelps, I advise you to compose yourself. What you have revealed is serious, a matter that touches upon criminal fraud and public dishonor. You have told us much, yet not all. If you wish my help, you must tell the whole truth." The man swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the door as though fearing the sudden appearance of his master. Sir Alaric discovered some years ago that the company he controlled was failing. He had invested unwisely: colonial railways, speculative mines. To conceal the losses, he created fictitious entries, false accounts, and imaginary assets. He told the board of a priceless jewel, a diamond gifted by an Eastern prince, as a form of private security pledged to the company. It was all lies, Mr. Holmes. Lies I helped him write. "And you were paid for your silence?" Holmes asked quietly. Phelps lowered his head. "Handsomely at first, but his funds dwindled, and then he began to threaten me. I feared ruin, imprisonment. I kept copies of his forged documents, hidden for my protection. He must have discovered this, for I found the drawers disturbed yesterday. I came tonight to reclaim what little shield I had left." Holmes leaned back, his eyes half closed. "An elaborate tale, but one detail troubles me. You say Lady Eveline discovered the truth. How?" The secretary hesitated, his lips trembling. "She found a letter, one I had written to Sir Alaric, imploring him to make a restitution before it was too late. I had left it upon his desk, unsealed. She read it before he returned. When he learned of it, he was beside himself. He swore she would ruin him unless he acted. It was that same evening he declared the diamond stolen." Holmes nodded slowly. "A clever ruse, a crime to conceal a crime, a theft that never was, yet served its purpose admirably." He rose, striking the ash from his pipe. "Mr. Phelps, you will remain here under Dr. Watson's supervision. If you attempt to flee, you will do yourself great harm. I am going to speak with Lady Eveline." Before I could protest, Holmes slipped from the room with his usual silent step. I watched him go, uneasy. The secretary sat motionless, hands clasped, eyes staring into the fire. The wind wailed against the windows like a living thing. Half an hour passed before I heard footsteps return. Holmes re-entered, his expression unreadable. "Well?" I asked. "She confirmed his story," said Holmes simply. "More than that, she has given us the final piece of the puzzle." He turned to the secretary. "Sir Alaric is even now in his study, burning the last remnants of his deceit. Lady Eveline has told him she will go to the authorities in the morning unless he confesses to his board. He is cornered, desperate, a dangerous combination." "What are you suggesting, Holmes?" I asked, alarmed. "That we act at once. Come, Watson, there is not a moment to lose." He strode swiftly toward the corridor. I followed, and together we made our way to the study door. A dim light shone from beneath it, and within we heard the faint crackle of flames. Holmes threw the door open without ceremony. Sir Alaric stood before the fireplace, a sheaf of papers in his hands. He turned, his face contorted with fury and despair. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he demanded. "The meaning, Sir Alaric," Holmes said coolly, "is that your pretended robbery is at an end. The truth is known. The Eye of Solomon never existed. You invented it to hide your embezzlement, and when discovery threatened, you staged its theft." The baronet gave a strangled laugh. "Absurd! Lies from that treacherous clerk of mine." Holmes stepped forward, his gaze unflinching. "Lies, you say? Then why, Sir Alaric, do you burn your papers at midnight? Why is there sealing wax upon your fingers and ash upon your sleeve? Why did you feign distress this morning when no man had seen the diamond you claimed was gone?" For an instant, Sir Alaric stood rigid, his mouth working soundlessly. Then he flung the papers into the fire. "What would you have me do?" he cried hoarsely. "Confess to ruin, to disgrace? You think me a villain. I am a desperate man. I meant no harm. I thought I could repair the losses before they were discovered. But when Eveline found the letter..." He broke off, sinking into a chair, his face buried in his hands. The flame light danced across the room, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Holmes regarded him in silence. Then, in a tone of almost pity, he said, "It is not my office to condemn, Sir Alaric. The facts will speak for themselves. But you must understand that this charade has run its course. There was no theft, no jewel, only a fiction born of fear. The sooner you face that truth, the less harm will follow." Sir Alaric lifted his head, eyes hollow. "And what of my wife?" he whispered. "She will never forgive me." "Perhaps," said Holmes softly, "but she has shown a courage that might yet redeem your name. She is kept silent, though she might have exposed you long ago." At that moment, Lady Eveline appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, but composed. "It is finished, Alaric," she said quietly. "You must make amends, for both our sakes." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly, as though a great weight had fallen from him. "Very well," he murmured. "Tomorrow I shall write to the board and confess all." Holmes inclined his head. "A wise decision. And now, if you will excuse us, Dr. Watson and I will leave you to your thoughts." We withdrew to the corridor where the wind moaned through the chimneys. Holmes paused, striking a match to relight his pipe. His face was grave. "A sad business, Watson, yet an instructive one. Here we have a crime that never happened, yet destroyed a man more completely than any robbery could have done. The weapon was imagination, the victim honor itself." He exhaled a thin plume of smoke. "Still, we are not entirely finished. There remains one curious detail, the false diamond. Lady Eveline has just confided to me that she substituted a paste imitation in her husband's safe weeks ago, suspecting his deceit. Had the police searched it, they would have found the imitation and exposed him instantly. Thus, when he declared it stolen, he spoke, in a twisted sense, the truth. There was no real gem to lose." I stared at him. "Then indeed, Holmes, it was the crime that never happened." He smiled faintly. "Precisely, and yet, in the eyes of conscience, it was perhaps the greatest of them all. The first light of dawn was stealing through the windows as we left Burnham Hall. The storm had passed, leaving the moorland glistening under a pale sky. Behind us, the house loomed grey and silent, its windows blank as the eyes of a penitent man. Holmes drew his cloak closer. "There are many forms of theft, Watson," he said as we walked down the drive. "One may steal a jewel or a fortune, or, as in this case, one's own peace of mind. Of the three, the last is the hardest to restore." And with that, he turned his face toward the rising sun, the ghost of a smile upon his lips, as though the enigma had resolved itself not only in logic, but in the strange justice of the human heart. For some days after our return to Baker Street, I heard nothing of the Burnham affair. Holmes, who was rarely given to retrospection, spoke of it but little. Yet I could see that it lingered in his thoughts. He spent long hours in his armchair, pipe in mouth, eyes fixed upon the fire, while the smoke drifted upward in slow meditative spirals. At times, he would jot a note upon a scrap of paper, or rise suddenly to pace the room in that quick, noiseless fashion of his, which always heralded some chain of reasoning pursued to its end. "It is an instructive case, Watson," he remarked one evening as I laid aside my newspaper. Not in the sense of criminal ingenuity, for there was none, but rather in the curious psychology of deception, the ease with which a man may come to believe the lie he tells. "You refer to Sir Alaric?" "Precisely. When I consider the matter, I find in him no ordinary rogue. He was, in truth, a man destroyed by his own invention. He created a phantom jewel to cloak his guilt, and in the end, that phantom became as real to him as any diamond in the Tower of London. He suffered not for the theft, but for the illusion of one." I could not help but agree. "And what of Lady Eveline?" I asked. "Has she carried out her intention to expose the fraud?" Holmes's expression softened, an unusual thing in him. "On the contrary, she has done nothing of the kind. Lestrade called upon me yesterday with the news that Sir Alaric has settled his affairs quietly. The company has been reimbursed, his resignation tendered, and the matter discreetly buried. Lady Eveline has saved his honour, and perhaps his life. There will be no prosecution." "A merciful conclusion," said I. Holmes shrugged lightly. "Mercy and justice seldom walk hand in hand, my dear Watson. Still, I shall not quarrel with the outcome. The world has lost a baronet and gained a chastened man." He fell silent again, and I thought the discussion closed. But later that night, when the streets outside had grown quiet, he drew from his pocket a small folded paper and handed it to me. "Read this," he said. It was a note, written in a woman's delicate hand. "Mr. Holmes, you once said that no crime is without its shadow. I believe you were right. My husband has confessed, and with your help we have a chance to begin anew. The Eye of Solomon is gone, but the truth remains. For that, I thank you. E. Burnham." I handed it back silently. Holmes slipped it into his desk drawer. "A curious phrase," he mused. "The Eye of Solomon is gone. Tell me, Watson, what do you make of it? That the diamond, real or otherwise, has been destroyed, perhaps?" Holmes smiled faintly. "Or perhaps something more subtle. The Eye of Solomon, as you recall, symbolized wisdom and judgment. In losing his false jewel, Sir Alaric may have regained both." The following morning brought a new diversion. A note from Lestrade requested Holmes's presence at Scotland Yard in connection with the Burnham affair. Holmes frowned when he read it. "Strange," he murmured. "I thought the curtain had fallen upon that drama. It seems there is an encore." Within the hour, we were in a cab bound for the Yard. Lestrade received us in his office, his sharp features alight with importance. "Glad you came, Mr. Holmes. It's about Burnham. Sir Alaric, that is. There's been an incident." Holmes seated himself. "Go on." "He was found dead this morning," said Lestrade bluntly. "Heart failure, the doctor says. Nothing suspicious at first glance, but there's something queer about it all the same." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Queer in what respect?" "His wife found him at his desk. The fire had burned low, and in the grate was the remains of a packet. Paper, cloth, and what looks like the ashes of sealing wax. And there was this beside him." Lestrade opened a drawer and produced a small dark object wrapped in cloth. Holmes unfolded it carefully. It was a dull, glassy stone, an imitation jewel. "The false diamond!" I exclaimed. "Just so," said Lestrade. "Seems he'd kept it after all. But there's the rub. Lady Eveline swears she destroyed it weeks ago. How it came back into his possession, heaven knows." Holmes examined the stone under the light. "A crude imitation," he said softly. "Paste and lead crystal. Yet it served its purpose. Tell me, Lestrade, did you find any letters or notes near the body?" "None. Just the ashes." Holmes pocketed the stone. "I shall visit Burnham Hall once more. I fancy the final act of this curious tragedy has yet to be played." We arrived that evening to find the house draped in mourning. Lady Eveline received us in the drawing room. Her composure was extraordinary, though her eyes were shadowed with grief. "You have heard," she said quietly. "He died peacefully, I am told. But why must you come again, Mr. Holmes? Surely it is over now." Holmes bowed slightly. "Forgive me, madam, but certain details trouble me. This imitation stone, for instance. You are certain you destroyed it?" "I did, with my own hands. I threw it into the fire the night before your visit." Holmes nodded. "And yet it was found near your husband's body. Would you know how it returned to his possession?" Her gaze faltered. "I cannot explain it. Perhaps he retrieved it before it was entirely consumed. He was proud, Mr. Holmes. Perhaps he could not part with the last symbol of his deception." Holmes regarded her steadily. "That is possible. And yet there are burns upon the edges of this imitation, consistent with its having been heated after your husband's death. I believe it was placed in the fire after he was gone, not before." She started violently. "You mean that someone else was present? Someone who wished to destroy the final evidence of what truly transpired last night?" There was a long silence. Then Lady Eveline said very softly, "Mr. Holmes, what do you suspect?" "That your husband, faced with ruin, took his own life, but that his death was made to appear natural, and that whoever was with him wished to preserve his reputation by erasing every sign of the act." Tears filled her eyes. "You are wrong," she whispered. "He was ill, weak. He spoke of peace, not despair." Holmes inclined his head. "Perhaps. Yet one fact remains. The door to his study was locked from the inside, the key in his pocket. If he had company, they were admitted by him willingly. There was no struggle. Whoever was there was trusted." She covered her face with her hands. "You are cruel, Mr. Holmes." "I am only truthful, madam," he said gravely. "But take comfort. I shall say nothing to the police. The world shall know only that Sir Alaric Burnham died of heart failure. Whether he died by his own hand or another's is a question that shall trouble no one but myself." When we left Burnham Hall, the night was still and cold. Holmes walked in silence for some distance before speaking. "There are moments, Watson, when the truth serves no good purpose. Justice, in such cases, lies not in revelation, but in restraint. Let the world believe in its quiet fictions. Reality is often the harsher story. And Lady Eveline? I asked. She will live with her secret, he said quietly. Perhaps that is punishment enough. The eye of Solomon is extinguished, and with it a chapter of folly and pride. We turned toward the station as the first light of dawn crept across the horizon. Holmes drew the false jewel from his pocket, holding it up so that it caught the pale gleam of morning. "See, Watson," he murmured, "a worthless thing. Yet it has been the ruin of a house, the death of a man, and the salvation of a woman. The world is full of such illusions. It is my business to expose them, but sometimes, perhaps, it is wiser to let them shine." He dropped the stone into the river beside us. It sank without a ripple. Holmes watched the water close over it, then turned away, his expression unreadable in the grey dawn. Several weeks had passed since the melancholy conclusion of the Burnham affair, and life at Baker Street had resumed its customary rhythm. Holmes was again immersed in his manifold pursuits: monographs on tobacco ash, chemical experiments that filled the air with noxious odours, and an occasional case of forgery or jewel theft to exercise his restless faculties. Yet I knew from certain inflections in his voice and from that peculiar faraway look in his eyes that the matter of Sir Alaric Burnham had not altogether faded from his mind. It was on a bleak afternoon early in February that a letter arrived which was destined to draw us once more into that unhappy orbit. Holmes broke the seal with a flick of his long fingers and glanced over the contents. I saw the sharp gleam of interest kindle in his grey eyes. "Watson," said he, "it seems the dead refuse to rest quietly. Lady Eveline Burnham has written to me. She begs that I come to Surrey immediately. It appears that the consequences of our crime that never happened are not yet ended." "Good heavens!" I exclaimed. "What new misfortune has befallen her?" He passed me the letter. It was brief, penned in a trembling hand. "Mr. Holmes, I implore you to come. Strange events have occurred at Burnham Hall. Since my husband's death, I have heard footsteps in the study at night, and once the safe door was found open, though no one in the house admits to having touched it. I am greatly afraid. I trust no one save you. Come at once, for pity's sake." Holmes rose at once, the spark of adventure rekindled. "There, Watson, you see? A mystery that insists upon living even after its author is dead. Pack your things. We catch the 4:20 from Waterloo." We arrived at Burnham Hall in the last pale light of day. The great house stood sombre against the fading sky, its windows dark save for a single flicker of firelight in the drawing room. Lady Eveline received us with visible relief. She had grown thinner, and there was an air of haunted vigilance about her. "I am ashamed to trouble you again, Mr. Holmes," she began, "but I can no longer bear the strain alone. There have been noises, footsteps along the corridor, the sound of someone moving papers in the study, and twice the servants have found the safe door open, though the key is locked in my drawer." Holmes regarded her steadily. "And these disturbances occur at night?" "Always near midnight. I have dismissed 2 maids already, suspecting them of mischief, but the sounds persist." "Then we must determine," said Holmes quietly, "whether we are dealing with the living or the dead. She gave a faint, nervous laugh. I am not one to believe in ghosts, Mr. Holmes, but the household is half mad with fear. Even the butler swears he has seen a figure crossing the hall. Holmes's expression betrayed neither disbelief nor credulity. I shall remain here tonight, madam. Perhaps our phantom will oblige us with a performance. After a frugal supper, we took up our vigil in the study, precisely as we had done on that stormy night months before. The house was silent, save for the ticking of the clock and the sigh of wind beyond the windows. Lady Eveline retired early, leaving us alone with the fire's dying glow. Holmes sat motionless, his eyes fixed upon the heavy safe embedded in the wall. "Tell me, Watson," he said softly, "what do you make of this haunting?" "I think," I replied, "that the imagination of the servants has been inflamed by grief and superstition. As for Lady Eveline, solitude and memory have played cruel tricks upon her." "Perhaps," said Holmes, "yet superstition often conceals design. We shall see." The hours dragged on. Midnight came. Suddenly, Holmes raised a finger. From somewhere beyond the door came the faintest creak of a board, followed by a soft, deliberate tread. We held our breath. The handle turned slowly. Then, with infinite caution, the door opened. A figure slipped within, tall, cloaked, and carrying a shaded lantern. The intruder crossed to the safe, kneeling before it with practiced ease. A key turned, and the door swung open noiselessly. "Now, Watson," whispered Holmes. We leapt forward. The lantern crashed to the floor as the stranger sprang up with a cry. The hood fell back, and Lady Eveline herself stood revealed, her face deathly pale, eyes wide with terror. "Mr. Holmes, you frightened me. I did not know you were here." Holmes lowered his hand slowly. "Madam, it seems you were the ghost who haunted your own house." She sank into a chair, trembling violently. "I could not rest," she murmured. "There are things, papers, I wished to destroy before others could find them. My husband's shame. I cannot bear to see it live on." Holmes's voice was gentle but firm. "You mean the records of his fraud? Then why not have burned them before now?" She pressed her hands to her face. "Because they are not all his. There are letters, my own, written to the man who tempted him into that ruin. I thought to recover them after his death, but I found only copies. Someone else has the originals." "Ah," said Holmes softly. "Then our haunting has a living author after all. Tell me, who was this man?" She hesitated. "A financier named Barlow, my husband's associate. He visited the hall once, years ago. He admired me, too much. When I repelled him, he turned his attentions to Alaric, offering easy loans and dangerous advice. I believe he holds those letters now and uses them to extort money from me." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "A rational ghost at last. Did he write to you?" She nodded and produced a crumpled note. Holmes examined it under the light. Crude stationery, but an expensive hand. Deliver the documents or face exposure. The address, interesting. A private office in Threadneedle Street. I shall call upon Mr. Barlow tomorrow." "Then you believe me?" she whispered. "I never disbelieved you," said Holmes gravely. "But I deal in evidence, not fear. Rest easy tonight. There will be no more footsteps in your corridor." The next morning found us in London. Holmes lost no time in tracing the address. It led us to a modest suite of rooms above a shipping office. A clerk informed us that Mr. Barlow had gone abroad 3 weeks earlier leaving no word of return. "Curious," said Holmes, "yet not unexpected. Such men vanish when the ground grows too hot." He searched the office with his usual thoroughness. In a locked drawer, he discovered several sealed envelopes, each containing correspondence bearing the Burnham crest. "The originals," he said quietly. He left in haste. "Watson, this ends our haunting." When we returned the letters to Lady Eveline that evening, she broke into tears of relief. "How can I thank you, Mr. Holmes?" she said. Holmes bowed slightly. "By forgetting ghosts and cherishing the living. The dead, madam, can haunt us only through our own remorse." As we took our leave, she said softly, "Then it is truly over." "Over and done," Holmes replied. "The crime that never happened is finally laid to rest." That night, as our train steamed back toward London, Holmes sat gazing out into the darkness. "You see, Watson," he murmured, "how truth insists upon returning, even when buried under falsehood. The phantom thief, the false diamond, the supposed haunting, all were masks concealing one reality: guilt. It is the most tireless of all spectres." He turned from the window and smiled faintly. "Let us hope, for Lady Eveline's sake, that this time it sleeps." And so ended the curious aftermath of the Burnham case, a mystery that began with a theft and concluded with redemption, though no single coin, jewel, or life was taken by another's hand. It was, as Holmes once said, the most extraordinary of all paradoxes, a crime that existed only in the conscience and nowhere else in the world. Spring had touched London with its first faint breath when the Burnham case, which I had thought finally concluded, returned to occupy our attention in a most unexpected form. The affair had long since faded from the public mind. The newspapers, after hinting at scandal, had turned to fresher sensations, and Holmes himself had thrown his energies into a succession of minor investigations. I confess that I believed Lady Eveline to be at peace at last. But events were soon to prove that the dead, once stirred from their rest, do not so readily return to it. It was a bright April morning when the door of Baker Street opened and Inspector Lestrade entered, looking more than usually perplexed. Holmes, who had been dissecting the mechanism of a French clock with minute attention, rose at once. "Good morning, Lestrade. What mischief blows you our way? A forgery, a poisoning, or the theft of the crown jewels?" "None of those, Mr. Holmes," said the inspector. "But it's another strange one, and I thought you'd wish to hear of it. It concerns the late Sir Alaric Burnham." Holmes's eyes brightened. "Ah, so the grave yields up its secrets after all. Pray sit down and tell us everything." Lestrade drew a paper from his pocket. "A message came to the Yard yesterday. It was sent anonymously, postmarked from Dover. It claims that Sir Alaric Burnham was murdered, not by poison or violence, but by the deliberate tampering of his medicines." Holmes took the paper and read it swiftly. "Look to the wife's apothecary bottle. The heart failed by design." A curious phrase. He folded it neatly. "And what do you propose to do?" "Well, there's no evidence as yet," Lestrade admitted. "The coroner's verdict was heart failure, as you know. Still, the letter's detailed enough to raise suspicion. Lady Eveline's name is mentioned directly. I thought, perhaps, that I might prevent you from blundering into a scandal," Holmes finished dryly. "Quite right. When sentiment and justice pull in opposite directions, your path, my dear Lestrade, is apt to become entangled. Very well, I shall look into it. you will say nothing to the press." Lestrade nodded and withdrew, evidently relieved. Holmes turned to me. "Pack your bag, Watson. We are off once more to Burnham Hall. It seems that even a crime that never happened may yet demand its corpse." We reached Surrey before evening. The familiar grey facade of the hall loomed through the budding trees, unchanged save for the heavy drapery at the windows. Lady Eveline received us with visible apprehension. Her mourning dress accentuated the pallor of her face. "Mr. Holmes," she said, "I feared you might come. The inspector has written to me. Tell me at once, do they suspect me of something dreadful?" Holmes bowed gravely. "I trust not, madam. I am here to prevent such suspicion from taking root. But I must ask you to speak with perfect candor. Did your husband suffer from any malady for which you administered medicine?" She hesitated. "Yes, his heart was weak. The physician prescribed a tincture of digitalis. I kept the bottle in the cabinet of my dressing room." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "And that bottle, is it still there?" "I believe so. I have not touched it since his death." "Then, with your permission, we shall examine it." She led the way upstairs to a small boudoir adjoining her room. Holmes inspected the cabinet, selecting a small vial half filled with amber liquid. He held it up to the light. "Watson," said he, "this bottle has been opened recently. See the smear of residue upon the cork? The contents, too, appear cloudy. You have your medical bag?" I uncorked the vial and took a cautious sniff. "The odor is peculiar," I said. "There is digitalis, yes, but also something acrid, perhaps arsenic, though faint." Holmes replaced the cork carefully. "A delicate blend, Watson. Too delicate to be accidental. Someone has altered this mixture since the day it left the chemist's hands." Lady Eveline stared at him in horror. "You mean that he was murdered?" Holmes's expression was inscrutable. "I mean only that his medicine was tampered with. Whether by intention or ignorance remains to be seen. Who besides yourself had access to this room?" "No one. My maid left months ago. I dismissed her after my husband's death." "Ah, the maid. What was her name?" "Carson. Emily Carson." "Do you know where she went?" "She spoke of a cousin in Dover," said Lady Eveline faintly. Holmes exchanged a quick glance with me. "Dover, Watson. The postmark upon our anonymous letter. The coincidence grows interesting." He turned to Lady Eveline. "I must ask for your patience. I shall telegraph the Yard to make inquiries at once. If your maid has indeed written that letter, we may soon know her motive." That night, Holmes sat long by the hearth in his room at the village inn, his eyes fixed upon the curling smoke from his pipe. "Watson," he said at length, "you remember that our first visitor in this affair, Sir Alaric, bore traces of sealing wax upon his hands. You remember, too, the forged documents and the false diamond. All were the work of desperate deceit. Now, mark how the pattern repeats itself. A letter posted from Dover, a tainted vial, and again a woman's hand behind the veil." "You think Lady Eveline guilty?" I asked in astonishment. He shook his head. "No, she has too much to lose and too little to gain. But guilt may wear another's face. I believe we stand on the edge of discovering the true architect of this long deception." The following afternoon brought a telegram from Lestrade. Maid Emily Carson traced to Dover lodging house. Left last week for France with man answering description of Phelps, late secretary to Burnham. Both believed travelling under assumed names. Holmes's eyes gleamed. So, the secretary and the maid, an alliance born of opportunity. You recall, Watson, how Phelps confessed to possessing copies of the fraudulent papers. It seems he has used them to good advantage. We returned to London that same night, and by the following morning, Holmes had set the machinery of the yard in motion. Within 48 hours, word came that the fugitives had been intercepted at Calais. Holmes and I crossed the Channel to assist in their examination. Phelps appeared broken and ill, his once neat appearance disordered by travel. The woman clung to him with the desperation of fear. When confronted with the vial from Lady Eveline's cabinet, Phelps buried his face in his hands. "I did not mean to kill him," he muttered. "I only meant to frighten her, to make her pay. I poured a few drops of the arsenic mixture into the bottle, thinking he would fall ill again and she would buy my silence. But his heart was weaker than I knew." Holmes regarded him coldly. "Then your anonymous letter was an act of remorse?" Phelps nodded miserably. "I thought to save her, and myself, but it was too late." That night, as we crossed once more toward England, Holmes stood upon the deck, his coat flapping in the wind. "There, Watson," he said, "lies the true conclusion of our phantom crime. A theft that never happened, a duel that never was, and, at last, a death that was meant only to terrify. How many lives have been consumed by this shadow?" He drew his collar close. "I have seen much wickedness, but seldom one so entangled in its own lies. Truth, like the sea beneath us, has a way of swallowing all such fabrications in the end. And as the lights of Dover came into view, I thought of Burnham Hall, silent now, emptied of its illusions, and of the man who had created a false diamond to conceal a false fortune, only to find that deception, once born, multiplies like a contagion until it destroys all who touch it." Holmes turned to me suddenly, his face thoughtful in the salt wind. "You may title your notes of this affair, Watson," said he, "The Crime That Refused to Die. For though it began as nothing, it ended, as so many of man's follies do, in blood." The Burnham affair might well have ended with the arrest of the wretched Phelps and his companion. But fate, as ever, seemed unwilling to grant my friend a simple conclusion. For several weeks after our return from France, Holmes appeared restless and dissatisfied. Though the newspapers proclaimed the case solved, and the courts soon confirmed Phelps's guilt, I could see that my friend's mind was far from at ease. The files upon the matter remained spread across our table at Baker Street. I would often find him at dawn with his head bent over the documents, his pipe gone cold, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. "You are not convinced, Holmes," I said to him one morning as I set down my cup of coffee. "What more could trouble you? The man has confessed. His motive is clear, the evidence conclusive." He looked up sharply. "Evidence? Yes. But truth, my dear Watson, is a rarer commodity. I have learned to distrust confessions extracted by despair. Phelps was a weak man, but not, I think, a killer. He spoke of adding a few drops of poison, but the analysis of the vial revealed quantities far in excess of his account. There is someone, still unaccounted for. You believe there was another hand?" "I believe," said Holmes, "that we have been looking at the shadow, not the substance." He rose abruptly and fetched a small leather notebook from his drawer. "Observe, Watson, This is a record of the late Sir Alaric's financial dealings. Note the name which recurs in every entry, Barlow & Co., the firm of the same financier whose extortions brought about the first calamity. Now mark this. Barlow vanished from London at the very time of Sir Alaric's death. He left no trace, no correspondence. Why should a man of business disappear so completely? I frowned. You think Barlow may have followed the Burnhams even after his partner's ruin? Followed, directed, perhaps even avenged, Holmes murmured. What if the poison was not poured by a servant, but by the hand that first guided Sir Alaric into deceit? The crime began with Barlow's cunning. It may well have ended with his vengeance. He snapped the book shut. Pack your bag, Watson. We go to the coast once more. Within the day, we had traced Barlow's movements to a small property near Folkestone, registered under an assumed name. The place, a lonely cottage overlooking the sea, was kept by an elderly caretaker who admitted that his master had been there but seldom, preferring to receive correspondence by post and to visit at irregular intervals after dusk. Holmes examined the rooms with his usual precision. The furniture was sparse, yet in the grate he found the half-burned remains of several letters. One bore the unmistakable crest of the Burnham family. Another fragment displayed a signature. Eveline B. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Watson," he said quietly, "this man has been in communication with Lady Eveline herself." I was astonished. But why should she write to him? Surely she would have no reason to resume contact after what had passed. On the contrary, Holmes replied, she had every reason. Consider her position. A widow surrounded by scandal, the knowledge of her own letters in the possession of a scoundrel. Suppose Barlow, sensing her vulnerability, renewed his demands. A letter from her hand might then appear not as affection, but as plea. She may have hoped to buy his silence. He turned the ashes over delicately with his penknife. But note, these were destroyed recently, within the week. Someone came here to erase the trail. Just then, the caretaker, who had been watching us uneasily, cleared his throat. "Beg pardon, sir, but there was a gentleman here not 3 nights ago. Came after dark, stayed perhaps an hour, left on foot toward the cliffs." Holmes fixed him with a sudden intensity. "Describe him." "Tall, thin, wore a grey cloak and hat, walked with a stick, though he moved brisk enough." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. A grey cloak, a walking stick, the very description given of Barlow before his disappearance. "Watson, we must follow the coast path." The evening was closing fast as we set out across the moorland toward the cliffs. A heavy mist hung over the sea, and the cry of the gulls came faintly through the fog. After half a mile, Holmes stopped abruptly. "Look there," he said, pointing to the ground. In the damp soil lay a set of footprints, deep, uneven, leading to the very edge of the precipice. Nearby, a broken stick lay half buried in the mud. Holmes knelt to examine it. "Barlow's, beyond doubt," he murmured. "But see, Watson, the final impressions are doubled." Another man walked beside him. We approached the cliff edge cautiously. Below, the waves thundered against the rocks. Holmes surveyed the scene for several minutes, then straightened. "No body has been recovered, yet the inference is clear. There was a struggle here, and one at least did not survive it. Whether accident or design remains to be learned." We returned to London the following day, and before the week was out, a fisherman's net off Folkestone brought to light the body of a man later identified as Barlow. The coroner's verdict was accidental drowning, though Holmes read the report with evident skepticism. "The tide, Watson," he said, "washes away much, but not conscience. There are letters, footprints, traces of correspondence yet unseen. Someone met Barlow that night, and I think I know who. He wrote a brief note and sent it by special messenger. That evening, Lady Eveline Burnham appeared at Baker Street. Her mourning garb could not conceal the proud composure of her bearing, yet there was a tremor in her voice as she greeted us. "Mr. Holmes, you sent for me. Is it true what I read in the papers, that Barlow is dead?" "It is true," said Holmes. "He drowned near Folkestone, but it is also true that he was not alone upon those cliffs." She drew back, her hand at her throat. "What do you mean?" "That you met him there," Holmes said quietly. "You wrote to him, begging the return of your letters. He summoned you to the coast, promising to destroy them. Instead, he sought to renew his threats. In your desperation, you struggled. The cliff gave way beneath him. For a moment, she stared at him in silence, then sank into a chair. "How could you know?" she whispered. "Because the footprints at the scene were of a man and a woman, the latter's small and sharply defined by the heel of a mourning boot. Because his stick was broken as if wrenched from his grasp. And because..." Holmes held out the fragment of her letter, retrieved from the ashes in the cottage. "This was written in your hand." She hid her face in her hands. "It is true," she said faintly. "He trapped me there. I tried to flee, but he caught my arm. I struggled, and then he was gone. I did not mean his death." God knows I did not. Holmes stood motionless for a long while, then said gently, "Madam, the law would see in that the hand of accident. I shall see that it remains so. Your husband's name is already buried. Let it not be disinterred again. Go in peace and sin no more." When she had gone, I turned to him in astonishment. "You will not report it?" He shook his head. "What purpose would it serve? The wages of deceit have been paid in full. A false gem, a false theft, and a false life. Each now lies buried where it belongs." He walked to the window and looked out upon the dim lights of Baker Street. "There are cases, Watson," he said softly, "in which justice is better left to the elements. The sea has claimed its due. Let us not disturb it further." And thus the final shadow of the Burnham mystery passed into silence. Yet to this day, when I think of that desolate cliff and the endless murmur of the waves below, I seem to hear again Holmes's quiet voice. There are crimes, my dear Watson, which the law cannot touch, for they are committed not in the world of men, but in the heart, and there lies their true punishment. In the tranquil months that followed the Burnham affair, London resumed its steady pulse of intrigue and commerce, and Holmes seemed once more absorbed in his usual studies. The endless clatter of hansom wheels below our windows, the cry of the newsboys on Baker Street, and the scent of tobacco smoke in our sitting room restored the comforting familiarity of routine. Yet, as I soon learned, the shadows of the past are not easily dismissed, and the Burnham mystery had not, as I fondly imagined, reached its final conclusion. It was on a soft June morning that the next chapter began. I had just returned from my rounds when I found Holmes deep in correspondence, his long fingers flicking through a series of envelopes like a banker counting notes. The morning light, slanting across the table, illuminated a single sheet upon which was written only 2 words in a firm, masculine hand. "Forgive me." Holmes's expression was one of grim satisfaction. "The handwriting," said he, "is that of Lady Eveline Burnham, and yet the postmark is from Edinburgh, not Surrey. She has fled her home, Watson, fled, I think, from her own conscience." I uttered an exclamation of surprise. "But she was cleared of suspicion. Surely you do not believe the matter of Barlow's death has been reopened?" "Not by the law," he replied, "but perhaps by memory. The living carry heavier chains than the condemned." Before I could reply, Mrs. Hudson entered with a telegram. Holmes read it quickly, then handed it to me without comment. It was from Lestrade, Barlow's associate identified. "Evidence of conspiracy in Burnham fraud resurfaced. Need your counsel immediately." Holmes rose at once, his eyes bright with renewed purpose. "There, Watson, you see how the past breeds its offspring. If Barlow had partners, then the death of one villain may have awakened another. Fetch your hat. The game is afoot once more." At Scotland Yard, we found Lestrade pacing like a terrier on a scent. "Glad you're here, Mr. Holmes. We've arrested a man calling himself Travers, a solicitor who once represented Barlow & Co. We found among his papers a packet of correspondence between Barlow and Sir Alaric Burnham. It seems the fraud extended further than anyone knew. But that's not the strangest part. Travers claims he has a witness, someone still living who can prove that Barlow was murdered deliberately and not by accident. Holmes's expression hardened. A dangerous assertion. And who is this supposed witness? None other than Lady Eveline Burnham. The silence that followed was heavy. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and I could see the flicker of unease beneath his calm exterior. "She has gone north," he murmured, half to himself. Of course, the summons of conscience or fear. Lestrade, have her movements been traced? Her maid reports that she left by the night train 2 days ago. No destination given. Holmes turned to me briskly. "We go to Edinburgh by the next express. Bring your revolver, Watson. I fancy this will not be a peaceful journey." Our train reached the Scottish capital the following evening under a sky of fading gold. We took lodgings near Princes Street and began our inquiries at once. It was not long before Holmes discovered that Lady Eveline had indeed registered at a quiet hotel under her own name. Yet she had left the previous morning, leaving behind only a note addressed to Mr. Sherlock Holmes. He opened it in my presence. "Mr. Holmes, I knew you would come. Do not seek me. There is a wrong I must set right before I can rest. You spoke once of justice that lies beyond the law. You were right. When this reaches you, I shall have done what must be done." Holmes folded the note carefully, his face grave. "She is moving toward the end she has foreseen since that night on the cliffs. But what form it will take, I cannot yet tell. There is only one man she could be seeking, Travers." The next morning brought confirmation. Travers had escaped custody in London under mysterious circumstances. The police supposed bribery. Holmes suspected complicity. "He will seek her out," said he. "The spider returns to its web." We hurried southward, and by the time we reached York, the chase had quickened. A telegram awaited us at the station. Lady Burnham and a gentleman answering Travers's description, seen boarding coach for Whitby. Destination uncertain. "Whitby!" Holmes exclaimed. "By the sea again, Watson. Fate is singularly fond of symmetry. By dusk, we reached that ancient port, the air sharp with salt, and the cries of gulls echoing off the ruined abbey above the town. Holmes made inquiries at the inn, and soon learned that a lady in mourning and a man of professional bearing had taken rooms nearby. "We shall go at once," said Holmes. "There is still time, perhaps, to prevent the last act of this melancholy drama." We found the house perched upon the cliffside, its windows glimmering faintly through the fog. As we approached, Holmes touched my arm. "Do you smell that, Watson? The acrid scent of paraffin oil. Someone has kindled a fire, and recently." We hastened forward. The front door was unlatched. Within, the narrow passage was filled with smoke. From an inner chamber came the sound of a man's voice, raised in anger, and a woman's cry. Holmes dashed forward. The scene that met our eyes was terrible. A lamp lay shattered on the floor, flames licking up the curtain. Travers stood beside the window, his face twisted with rage, his hand gripping Lady Eveline's wrist. "You shall not escape me again," he shouted. "The letters, the money, they are mine by right." Before Holmes could move, the lady wrenched free and seized the fallen lamp's base, hurling it aside. The flames leapt upward with sudden fury. Holmes sprang between them, dragging her toward the door, while Travers, in his madness, stumbled backward against the fire. The next instant, the room was an inferno. We barely escaped into the open air as the house roared behind us, a column of fire against the sea. Holmes half carried Lady Eveline to safety. She was trembling, but unhurt. When the dawn came, little remained of the house but blackened ruins. The body of Travers was found amid the wreckage, beyond recognition. Lady Eveline sat apart upon the cliffs, her face turned toward the sea. "It is over," she said quietly. "At last." Holmes regarded her with infinite gentleness. "Yes, madam, the past has burned itself out." She looked at him with sad calm. "You once said that justice lies sometimes beyond the law. Perhaps fire is its truest servant." Holmes bowed his head. "Perhaps, but may it bring you peace, for that is rarer still." We accompanied her back to London in silence. When, some days later, she departed for the continent, I knew instinctively that Holmes would never see her again. As the train pulled away, he stood motionless upon the platform, his thin face set in thoughtful repose. "Watson," he said at last, "we have witnessed the extinction of a long and costly illusion. There was never a diamond, never a theft, only human pride, deceit, and the slow revenge of conscience. The world will record it as tragedy, but I think it was justice in its purest, most terrible form." He turned toward the city, where the smoke of the engines mingled with the morning mist. "Let us go home," he murmured. "There is always another mystery, but perhaps none that shall haunt us quite like the crime that never happened." It was late in the summer of that same year when the Burnham affair, so long and strange a chapter in Holmes's career, took what I may call its final and most unexpected turn. For months, we had heard nothing further of Lady Eveline, who, as I have mentioned, departed for the continent after the tragic events at Whitby. Holmes returned to his accustomed pursuits with a quiet that was not indifference, but exhaustion. The case had cost him more in thought and spirit than any I could recall. "It is a curious thing, Watson," he said to me one evening as we sat together in Baker Street, "how falsehood, once uttered, breeds its own posterity. One lie begets another, until truth itself becomes an intruder. I sometimes think that every crime begins not with an act, but with a word, spoken in haste, believed in pride. I made no reply, for his mood was introspective, and I knew better than to disturb it. Yet before the week was out, the Burnham name once again intruded upon our peace, and in a manner so singular that even Holmes, master of anomalies, confessed himself astonished. It began with the arrival of a foreign visitor, a tall, distinguished gentleman with silvered hair and the complexion of one who has known sunnier climes. He introduced himself as Count Victor d'Arnaud, attaché of the French embassy. "I have come to you, Mr. Holmes," said he, "upon a delicate mission concerning a lady formerly known to you, Lady Eveline Burnham." Holmes's expression hardened slightly. "You know her whereabouts, then?" "I do. She is at present residing in Paris under the name of Madame Valette. She lives quietly, but it seems her past has pursued her across the Channel. Certain papers have come into my possession, letters written by her late husband to a financier named Barlow." Holmes's brows rose. Barlow again. I had thought the man's ghost finally laid to rest. The Count smiled faintly. "The letters were found in the archives of a defunct bank in Marseille. They speak of a transaction involving state securities and a diamond called the Eye of Solomon. My government wishes to know whether the gem ever truly existed. You, monsieur, are said to be the only man who can answer that question." Holmes regarded him for a moment with that inscrutable gaze of his. "Tell your government, Count, that the Eye of Solomon was but the reflection of a guilty conscience. It never existed, save in the imagination of a man driven to deceit." The Frenchman inclined his head gravely. "That may be, monsieur. Yet, only a fortnight ago, a stone purporting to be the Eye of Solomon was sold in Paris for a sum exceeding 100,000 francs. Holmes started. "Impossible! It was a fabrication, a legend." "So we believed. But the purchaser, a collector of Oriental curiosities, swears to its authenticity. He bought it from a lady whose description matches that of Madame Valette." There was a long silence. Then Holmes said quietly, "You have brought the storm back to us, Count. Leave the matter in my hands. I shall come to Paris within the week." When the Count had gone, Holmes turned to me with the old fire rekindled in his eyes. "Watson, the phantom diamond has risen from its grave. Either Lady Eveline has discovered the real gem her husband only pretended to own, or she has created one so perfect that even experts are deceived. In either case, we must go to her." 2 days later found us in Paris. Holmes, ever the master of swift inquiry, had by the evening located Madame Valette's address, a modest residence overlooking the Seine. We were admitted by a servant and shown into a sitting room fragrant with lilies. Lady Eveline entered almost at once. She greeted Holmes with composure, though I detected a tremor in her hand. "You should not have come, Mr. Holmes," she said quietly. "My past was buried." "Buried things have a way of returning to the surface," Holmes replied. "I am told that you have sold a diamond called the Eye of Solomon. May I ask where you obtained it?" She looked at him steadily. "Does it matter? It has brought no one harm." "On the contrary," Holmes said, "it has revived a chain of events that has cost more lives than I care to count. You know as well as I that such a gem never existed." "Perhaps it did once," she murmured, "and we were all too blind to see it." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "You mean that you have fabricated it? To clear your name, perhaps, or to redeem your fortune?" A faint smile touched her lips. "You are clever, Mr. Holmes. The world demanded proof of a thing that never was. I merely gave it the proof it wished to see. The diamond is an imitation, but a perfect one. I sold it to end the whispers, to pay my debts, and to live in peace." Holmes's voice was cold. "Fraud, madam, even when born of desperation, is still fraud." She drew herself up proudly. "And what of my husband's lies? His thefts, his deceptions? Did the law restore my honor when it ruined my life? No, Mr. Holmes, I have merely played the same game, but with better skill." Holmes regarded her with a mixture of admiration and pity. "You have risked much. The buyer will soon discover the truth, and when he does—" "He will not," she interrupted. "He is dead. The same night the gem changed hands, he was murdered in his own apartment. The police believe it was robbery. I swear I had no part in it." For the first time, I saw Holmes visibly shaken. "Good God, madam, you see what you have unleashed. The crime that never happened has become a crime that will not cease happening." She turned away, her voice low. "Perhaps it was inevitable. Falsehood calls to falsehood. You warned me once that conscience was the true judge. I have felt its verdict every day since." Holmes's tone softened. "Then help me now. Who else knew of your deception?" "No one. I worked alone. But the man who bought the stone, he spoke of a partner, a collector of rare gems, who had pressed him to make the purchase. I never saw the partner's face." Holmes's eyes flashed. "A partner! That is the key. Someone engineered this entire sale, using you as the unwitting agent. We must find him, and quickly." Within hours, he had traced the dead man's associate to a villa outside Paris, a recluse known as Monsieur Arnaud, famed for his obsession with Eastern relics. We arrived there at dusk, only to find the house deserted, its owner gone, the servants dismissed. In the study lay a single envelope addressed to Sherlock Holmes. Holmes tore it open. Inside was a note in precise English handwriting. "At last, the circle closes. You chased a phantom across years and seas. Now the phantom hunts you. The Eye of Solomon was mine from the beginning, and it returns to its master. Seek me not." The game continues. Holmes read it twice, then folded it carefully. "Watson," he said in a low voice, "we are no longer dealing with guilt or remorse, but with a mind that delights in the dance of deception itself. Someone has turned illusion into art and chosen me as his audience." He slipped the note into his pocket. "This, my dear fellow, is no longer merely the crime that never happened. It is the crime that refuses to end." As the carriage bore us back through the dim, gas-lit streets of Paris, I could see the gleam of grim fascination in his eyes. For all the tragedy and sorrow the Burnham case had brought, the challenge of intellect had returned to him like wine to a weary man. "Watson," he said suddenly, "we stand upon the edge of a larger mystery. When the curtain next rises, it may not be Lady Eveline or Barlow who takes the stage, but someone far more dangerous. The play is not finished yet." And I, knowing the strange magnetism of fate that always drew him to danger, could only nod in silence as the lights of the city flickered past like reflections in a dark and restless river. Our return to London was swift and silent. Holmes, throughout the journey, spoke little, save to mutter once or twice beneath his breath. The circle closes. Yes, but around whom? I had long grown accustomed to his habit of self-communion, yet that night there was in his tone something I had seldom heard before. a faint note of disquiet, almost a foreboding. Once back in Baker Street, he plunged at once into investigation. Maps of Europe, lists of dealers in jewels, and correspondence from the prefecture of police littered our table. For 3 days, he worked without rest, hardly touching food, rising only to pace the floor in long, measured strides. It was not until the 4th morning that he turned to me, his face pale, but his eyes alight. "Watson," said he, "the man who calls himself Arno is no recluse. He is a criminal of the most extraordinary resource, one whose name I have encountered before in the secret archives of the Yard. Have you ever heard of Anton de Vries?" The name stirred some distant recollection. A Dutch adventurer, was he not? Accused of jewel theft in Amsterdam? The same. A man of prodigious daring and unrivaled cunning, believed to be dead for the last 5 years. Yet every line of his career shows the same signature: elaborate hoaxes, intricate forgeries, and the creation of crimes from mere illusion. He is, Watson, the very embodiment of deceit made flesh. I am convinced he is the author of this latest masquerade, the real thief of the Eye of Solomon, if such a stone has ever existed. He drew from his desk a small photograph, the portrait of a lean, hawk-faced man with piercing eyes and a faint, sardonic smile. That is de Vries. You will note the resemblance to our mysterious Count d'Arnaud, who visited us some weeks ago. I stared in astonishment. Good heavens, Holmes! Are you suggesting they are one and the same? I do not suggest. I assert it. He came to us under that false title to observe our reactions, to learn how much we knew. Having seen that Lady Eveline's remorse had blinded her to his deceit, he seized the opportunity to revive the old legend of the diamond, a legend born of lies, and to profit from it once again. And his motive? Revenge, perhaps. Vanity, certainly. Such men crave not only wealth, but admiration, the applause of the intellect. He has turned deceptions into art, and we are but unwilling spectators. He paused, then added quietly, "But I do not intend to remain an audience. De Vries has challenged me openly. I mean to accept that challenge." For the next week, Holmes disappeared for long hours each day. I knew better than to question his movements, though I could not suppress my growing unease. Rumors of a new jewel smuggling syndicate reached the London papers, hinting at operations that extended from Antwerp to Constantinople. One morning, Holmes burst into our sitting room, his face flushed with success. "Watson, the game advances. I have traced a consignment of contraband gems shipped under diplomatic seal to a warehouse on the Thames. De Vries operates there through intermediaries. Tonight, we shall pay him a visit." At dusk, we found ourselves creeping through the fog-bound alleys of the docks. The air was heavy with the reek of tar and salt water. Distant bells tolled through the mist. Holmes moved like a shadow, silent and purposeful. At last, we reached a low building, its windows dark, its door secured by a single iron lock. Holmes produced a slender instrument, and within moments had it open. The interior was dimly lit by a single lantern. Crates stood in orderly rows, each marked with the initials A.D. Holmes broke one open and drew out a velvet pouch. Within lay a glittering cascade of stones, rubies, emeralds, and diamonds, all cut to perfection. "The spoils of deception," he murmured. "Each gem a lie redeemed in gold." A faint creak from the shadows made us turn. From behind a pile of crates stepped a tall man wrapped in a dark cloak. The lantern's glow fell upon a face both mocking and refined, the very image from Holmes's photograph. "Good evening, Mr. Holmes," said he with an ironic bow. "I had almost despaired of your arrival. It is not often that one's audience insists upon attending the final act in person." Holmes's eyes flashed. "De Vries, or Darnaud, or whatever name you choose to hide behind, the play is over." The man laughed softly. "Over? My dear sir, it has scarcely begun. You hunt for truth, yet you cannot bear it when found. The Eye of Solomon was real, real enough to those who died for it. But perhaps it was never a stone at all. Perhaps it was merely knowledge, dangerous knowledge, and I, its custodian." "You are a thief and a murderer," Holmes said coldly. De Vries spread his hands. "Labels, my friend, mere labels. You and I are not so different. We both live by observation, deduction, and the mastery of illusion. You expose deception. I create it. Is that not the perfect balance of nature?" Holmes's revolver was in his hand. "The difference, sir, is moral, not intellectual. You stand upon the wrong side of that line." De Vries inclined his head with mock courtesy. "Then perhaps we should settle which of us deserves to remain upon it." In an instant, he had drawn his own weapon. The shot rang out, echoing like thunder through the warehouse. I felt the rush of air as the bullet passed close to my ear. Holmes fired in return, but the figure had already vanished into the gloom. The crash of breaking glass told us he had escaped through the window to the river beyond. We rushed outside, but the fog swallowed all trace of him. Only a faint ripple upon the dark water remained. Holmes stood motionless, listening to the retreating echo of footsteps on the wharf. "He is gone," I said. "For now," he answered quietly. "But mark my words, Watson. He will return. A man like De Vries does not vanish. He orchestrates his own disappearance. His mind is his weapon, and his vanity will not allow defeat." We turned back into the warehouse. Among the scattered crates, Holmes found a small box sealed with wax. He broke it open and drew out a single object, a diamond of extraordinary brilliance, glowing with an inner light that seemed almost alive. "The Eye of Solomon," he whispered. "So it exists after all." He held it to the lantern, and for a moment its facets blazed like captured lightning. Then, with a decisive gesture, he dropped it into his pocket. "What will you do with it?" I asked. "Keep it," he said, "until I know what manner of curse it carries. Every illusion must have a substance at its heart, and this, I fancy, is the heart of all our shadows." As we left the docks, the first pale light of dawn spread over the Thames. Holmes paused to gaze upon the sleeping city. "The game continues, Watson," he murmured. "But this time the stakes are higher than truth or falsehood. This time we play against imagination itself." And though I said nothing, I could not help but feel, as the mist closed behind us, that we had crossed some invisible boundary, from the world of fact into that strange twilight where even Sherlock Holmes might doubt whether the crime he pursued had ever truly happened at all. Several days passed before the next movement in that dark symphony announced itself. The Eye of Solomon, if indeed the dazzling gem we recovered could be called by that ominous name, lay hidden in Holmes's desk drawer, where he examined it by turns with scientific precision and almost morbid fascination. I had never seen him so deeply stirred. His usual dry irony gave place to a brooding intensity that reminded me of those rare occasions when some mystery touched not only his intellect, but the recesses of his spirit. "Watson," he said to me one morning as he bent over the stone beneath his magnifying lens, "I have handled 1,000 jewels in my time, but never one that troubled me like this. Observe the faint inner fire, not the glitter of light upon the surface, but a pulsing glow as though the heart of the stone were alive. Such luminescence is known only in certain crystals exposed to radioactivity. And yet this is cut in the Indian style of 2 centuries ago." "Then it is genuine?" I asked. "Genuine as the devil's own handiwork," he murmured. "But whether diamond or deception, I cannot yet tell. It may be that De Vries discovered something more perilous than theft, knowledge, as he himself said, that men were not meant to wield." He closed the drawer with a decisive snap. "Until I have traced the gem's history, it shall remain under lock and key. If mischief lies in it, I will not have London suffer for another man's ambition." For several weeks thereafter, Holmes haunted the libraries of the British Museum and the Oriental Department of the University, poring over treatises on Eastern relics, old trade records, and colonial archives. It was at the end of this research that he came to me one night with a single sheet of parchment, yellowed and brittle with age. "Behold," said he, laying it on the table, "the earliest mention of the Eye of Solomon. It appears in a record of 1789, describing a jewel brought from the court of Mysore by a Colonel Hastings, said to have been a diamond of unnatural brilliance, believed to contain the wisdom of its namesake. The legend claims that whoever gazed too long into its depths would see not truth, but his own desires reflected, and in that reflection, madness." He looked up at me with a strange light in his eyes. "Do you see, Watson? The pattern persists. Illusion breeding illusion. Burnham imagined it, Barlow profited by it, De Vries revived it, and now we hold it. The crime that began as a lie may have drawn reality around itself until the lie has become true." Before I could answer, there came a sharp knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson ushered in a visitor, a young man of foreign appearance, plainly but neatly dressed. He bowed low. "Mr. Holmes, I come on behalf of one who begs to speak with you, a lady recently arrived from Paris. She awaits you at the Langham Hotel. Her name, she says, will be sufficient. Madame Valette." Holmes shot me a glance of surprise. "Lady Eveline Burnham. So the wheel turns again. Tell her, my good fellow, that I shall attend her within the hour." When we reached the Langham, the lady was pacing the floor of her private parlour. She looked older, her beauty shadowed by anxiety. "Mr. Holmes," she cried as we entered, "I feared I should never reach you in time. They are following me, men I do not know. They demand the diamond. You must take it from me." Holmes regarded her steadily. "You mistake, madam. The diamond is already in my possession." She stared at him as though struck. "Then God help us all. They will come for you instead." "Who are they?" he asked. "I cannot say. They call themselves the Seekers of the Light. They claim the gem is sacred, that it was stolen from their temple long ago. They sent me letters in Paris, threatening death if I did not surrender it. I fled here, hoping to warn you." Holmes's expression grew grave. Then, De Vries was not the last guardian of this secret. We are dealing with a brotherhood, ancient, organized, and fanatical. They will stop at nothing. At that instant, A loud commotion sounded from the corridor. A man's voice barked an order in some guttural tongue, and before I could move, the door burst open. 3 men entered, swarthy, turbaned, armed with curved knives that glittered in the lamplight. Holmes sprang between them and the lady. "Stay back, Watson," he cried. The foremost assailant lunged forward, only to meet Holmes's sudden grasp. In a blur, the man was hurled against the wall. I fired my revolver, the report echoing through the room. 1 attacker fell, the other 2 fled. Within moments, the hotel staff and police arrived, and the melee ended as abruptly as it had begun. When calm returned, Holmes bent over the fallen man. "Dead," he said briefly. "A fanatic's face. See the brand upon his wrist, a sun within a triangle. That is their symbol. Watson, this matter grows darker than I had feared." Lady Eveline was trembling violently. "You see now," she whispered. "The eye brings only death." Holmes turned to her gently. "You must trust me, madam. I will see that the stone is delivered to those entitled to it, if such there be, but not until I am certain it belongs to them." That night, back at Baker Street, Holmes placed the diamond upon the table and gazed into it for a long time. The strange light within seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own quickened breath. "Watson," he said at last, "have you ever considered that knowledge itself may be the most dangerous of all treasures? What if this stone, forged by man's cunning or nature's whim, possesses some property that inflames the imagination, turning thought into vision and vision into madness? It would explain much: the obsession of Burnham, the greed of Barlow, the self-delusion of De Vries." He locked the stone away once more. "Tomorrow I shall take it to the Royal Institution. If it is mere carbon, science will expose it. If it is something else, well, then we shall see whether the Eye of Solomon blinds as well as reveals." But fate forestalled him. In the early hours of the morning, I was wakened by a crash from the sitting room. I rushed out to find Holmes standing before the open window, revolver in hand. The room was in disarray, the drawer of his desk forced open. "They have been here," he said quietly. "The seekers, swift and silent. See, the rope marks upon the sill. They have taken the diamond. We searched the street below, but the night swallowed all trace. Only a scrap of parchment remained upon the floor, marked with the same symbol, the sun within a triangle, and beneath it a single line in an unknown script." Holmes studied it long, then said, "So ends the theft of all thefts, the crime that began with illusion and ends with disappearance. The eye has returned to its darkness, and perhaps that is where it belonged." He turned to me, his face weary but composed. "Let it go, Watson. Some secrets guard themselves best when forgotten." And though I pressed him many times thereafter to record those events, he refused. "Write of it, if you will," he said, "but let the world believe it fiction. For if the Eye of Solomon truly exists, it is better that men think it never did." Thus, the affair was closed, or so I thought. Yet even now, when the firelight glints upon the crystal stopper of Holmes's old chemical bottle, I seem to see again that strange inner gleam, and I cannot help but wonder whether, after all, the crime that never happened was not merely a lie, but a truth too terrible to endure. Autumn had begun to paint London in its dusky hues, and the evenings grew cold and long. The events surrounding the Eye of Solomon, though apparently concluded, had left a deep impression upon Holmes. Never had I seen him so silent for such length of time. His violin remained untouched in the corner, his tobacco untouched for days together. He would sit for hours before the fire, his sharp profile outlined against the glow, his eyes fixed upon nothing, as though tracing invisible patterns of thought in the air. At length, one grey morning, he turned to me abruptly. "Watson," said he, "you believe in coincidences. I believe, perhaps, that life has more of them than we perceive." He smiled faintly. "Then it may interest you to know that 3 nights ago, a ship arrived at Tilbury from Bombay. On that ship was a man known as Raghunath Singh, once a high priest of Mysore. He inquired immediately for a certain detective residing in Baker Street." I raised my brows. "Another thread in the web, Holmes." "Precisely. He claims to represent the true custodians of the Eye of Solomon. Scotland Yard telegraphed me the notice only an hour ago. If this man speaks truth, then the diamond has indeed found its way home, or else it has brought its curse upon new hands." That same afternoon, Singh was shown into our sitting room. He was a tall man, with a grave, proud bearing and eyes dark as jet. Around his neck hung a small amulet, and in his hand he carried a parcel wrapped in silk. "Mr. Holmes," he said in a deep, sonorous voice, "I come as messenger of the Brotherhood of the Sun. The jewel you call the Eye of Solomon was stolen from our temple in Seringapatam many years ago. We have followed its trail through many lands. Now it is returned to us." Holmes regarded him steadily. "Returned? Then the seekers who attacked us—" "They were of our order, but misguided," Singh replied gravely. "They acted in zeal, not wisdom. The gem you guarded was recovered from them at sea. It is my duty to take it back to India, where it shall be sealed forever." He placed the parcel upon the table and unfolded the silk. There, gleaming like captured starlight, lay the diamond once more. I gasped. "But, Holmes, we saw it stolen with our own eyes." Holmes bent over it, the light flickering across his gaunt features. "Either these men are magicians, Watson, or else we are the victims of the most audacious imposture yet contrived. Tell me, Singh, how came you by this stone?" The man's gaze did not waver. "It was found in the possession of a dying sailor off Aden, who confessed that he had taken it from a house in London, where he was hired for burglary. He spoke of a man with keen grey eyes who fired upon him from the window." Holmes smiled without mirth. "Then my own bullets are part of your legend now. The circle truly closes." Singh inclined his head. "You do not believe?" "I believe only in evidence, sir. Permit me to test the stone." From his desk, Holmes produced a small phial, a crystal of borax and a lamp. He examined the diamond under magnification, breathed upon it, and subjected it to several tests. For 10 minutes he worked in silence while Singh and I watched. At last he straightened, his face pale with astonishment. "Watson," said he softly, "this is no mere imitation. It is a natural diamond of the first water, flawless, ancient, and unlike any specimen I have ever seen. Yet," he turned it once more under the lens. "See here, within the stone, at its heart, is a faint inscription in Sanskrit. By heavens, Singh, what sorcery is this?" The priest bowed his head. "It is no sorcery, Mr. Holmes. The eye was cut by holy hands to preserve the words of enlightenment. Those who read them are said to perceive the truth of their own souls. Many have gazed and perished." Holmes gave a short, impatient laugh. "Mysticism. Yet I confess it tempts me sorely to know what the inscription conceals." Singh's expression grew grave. "You are a seeker of knowledge, Mr. Holmes, but there are doors that no mortal mind should open. The eye has destroyed every man who tried to possess it. I beg you, return it to us." Holmes paced the room, his brow furrowed. "Tell me, Singh, what of Anton de Vries? Did your brotherhood know of him?" A shadow crossed the priest's face. "We knew him as Arno, the false scholar. He came among us years ago under guise of friendship, seeking the secret of the gem. When we refused, he stole it and fled. His soul, I think, is already judged." At that moment, a sharp knock sounded at the door, followed by Mrs. Hudson's voice. "A message for you, sir, from the yard." Holmes took the envelope and read it quickly. "De Vries has been sighted," he said grimly. "Alive, and in London. He was seen boarding a train to Dover not 3 hours ago." Singh's eyes blazed. "Then he seeks the eye once more. We must go after him." Within the hour, we were in pursuit. The express thundered through the night, Holmes silent beside me, Singh gazing out at the dark countryside. At dawn, we reached Dover, but De Vries had already crossed the channel. Without pause, we followed. By evening, we arrived at Calais. There, at the small harbour, we found our quarry. He stood upon the quay, a tall figure in a grey coat, speaking to a sailor beside a waiting launch. As we approached, he turned, and I shall never forget the smile that crossed his face when he saw Holmes. "So, my old adversary," said he, "you bring the treasure yourself. How convenient." "Give yourself up, De Vries," Holmes said sharply. "Your tricks are at an end." "Tricks? You still do not understand." He stretched out his hand toward Singh. "That stone belongs neither to you nor to your gods. It belongs to the mind that can comprehend it." Holmes moved swiftly, but De Vries was quicker. In an instant, he snatched the jewel from Singh's grasp and sprang toward the edge of the pier. There was a flash of light as the rising sun caught the gem, and then a plunge, a cry, and silence. We rushed to the water's edge. The waves closed over the spot where he had vanished. Holmes stared down for a long moment, then turned away. "It is finished," he said quietly. "The Eye of Solomon has claimed its final victim." Singh clasped his hands together in reverence. "So the prophecy is fulfilled. May his spirit find peace." We watched as the sun rose higher, its reflection trembling upon the sea. A glimmer flashed once, deep beneath the surface, then was gone forever. Holmes stood motionless, his expression unreadable. At last he said, "Come, Watson, there is nothing more to do." As we returned to the waiting train, I could not help but glance back at the calm expanse of water. Somewhere beneath those waves, perhaps, lay the jewel that had driven men to madness and death. Later, as the train carried us homeward, Holmes sat gazing out the window. "Strange, is it not," he murmured, "that a thing which began as illusion should end in reality? Burnham's lie gave birth to truth, and truth in turn devoured them all. There are crimes, Watson, that create themselves from the very hunger of the human mind." He leaned back, and for the first time in many weeks, he smiled faintly. "The eye is gone, the circle closed. Let us hope, my dear friend, that this time it stays closed." Thus ended, as I believed, the long and dreadful history of the Eye of Solomon, that mysterious gem which had lured so many into its shadow. Yet, even now, when I pass the Thames at twilight and see the light glimmering upon its surface, I recall Holmes's words and wonder whether some reflections, like crimes, are destined never wholly to fade.